Are we building athletes or just breaking them? So when we talk about developing better, more resilient athletes, why is a variety in training so important for them?
Well, variety exposes kids to a wide range of different movements so that we build, more tools in the kids' toolbox. We know that we talk about consistency a lot, but there's a risk there that doing the same thing over and over and over without some variety potentially just reinforces the wrong things. That's pretty common. We see in some sport examples where essentially just playing sport over and over and over. So when we talk about variety, we're talking about a bit of sport, potentially some speed running mechanics work, some gym work. They're playing, even within sport, some different sports. So they're getting exposed to a wide range of stimulus, movement skills, problem solving, so that then we've got really robust, well-developed athletes.
And so what are the consequences of doing the same rep every sort of single day for just the same sport?
Well, what essentially happens is it's the same sort of load repeated over and over on the same muscles, same joints. So while kids are fairly resilient generally, that they bounce back pretty quick, compare that to when you're like me, nearly 40, the difference is that from a skill set, while they probably still are risk of getting injured at the time, they also then have a much higher chance of getting injured later on in their late teens because of what they did at 12, 13, 14.
So why does early generalization actually give more tools for athletes to use in the long run?
It's the same reason at school we do all the different subjects. It's about trying to have well-rounded knowledge. We don't just only go and study maths from kindergarten all the way through. You'd be really good at maths, but you'd have not much understanding of anything else. So similar, if we only ever did shooting skills with basketball, then even within that sport, what's their off-ball work like? What's their defensive work like? Let alone movements in other sports. And then we start talking range of motion, strength, power, speed, control, their balance, all that sort of stuff. It takes a really well-rounded approach to actually get those things to a level that can perform in a chaotic sport environment, especially if the kids are talented and play at a high level later on.
And you've touched on it there around seeing more injuries now through kids just playing multiple sports at multiple times. So are they getting injured because of they're sort of burning out, or what is it?
Yeah, I think it's a blend between too much workload and then because the way sports are going to keep kids in sports, and there's we're almost going a bit more American model where lots of games, even training starting to look more and more like multiple games across the week. So it's a lot of high intensity exposure. There's not a lot of off days or rest days. And that's the issue. So we're saying variety on one hand. So yes, play a few different sports. The danger there is you do all your sports at once. Because now Monday's basketball, Tuesday's footy, Wednesday's school basketball, Thursday's back at footy training, Friday's a game of basketball, Saturdays maybe off or something else, or travel home, and then Sunday's footy game. So there's this lots of really high intensity stimulus in there, and that's before they touch any gym, anything else around that, extra potentially conditioning work or anything like that. So it then all of a sudden just their week, it gets pretty stacked really quickly. And this is in developing bodies where they need some rest to actually sort of start to adapt and see these results.
And for our really talented athletes who are sort of multi-sport and quite good at multiple sports, and they play rep basketball, rep footy, and they get picked for all these sort of rep teams, how do they balance that?
It's tough. It's almost a curse because I think the better you are, the more invites you get. So it becomes really hard to say no to things. So that's probably the key thing, is just identifying what's my priority at the moment. Not to say that if you're a gun basketballer now, you don't become a soccer player in 3-4 years' time. It's just keep an eye on long-term focus. Don't have to be in a rush right now. Put your time into what you're passionate about and enjoying right now. A way to think of it is you think of structured sport a lot. So it's like a role model kid in basketball, role model kid in footy, in soccer, in swimming. Kids can just play. So lunchtime sport counts as a bit of variety. So if you've got a footy player or a netballer, but they play a bit of soccer or a bit of basketball or something at lunchtime, that's what we're talking about. It's a bit of unstructured play, kicking the footy with my mates after school when you play basketball 2-3 times a week. That's where you get a bit of variety, do a bit of some different stuff.
And so when we talk about that kind of structured training per se, sort of referencing high and sort of low stress days, what does that kind of look like?
What people need to understand is when we train or play, stress is exposed to us and we need to adapt to that stress. And that's essentially where we get better. So it's not the training itself, it's how the body adapts. So if you're not allowing the adaptation to take place, all you're doing is beating your body up without the chance to actually improve from that. So it becomes pointless. And that's why some kids that actually do less end up better, because the kids that are doing more aren't allowing the adaptation to occur, so they actually go backwards. So typically, and this is where, again, some people are misinformed, is that adaptation can take 48 to 72 hours. So we're talking 2 to 3 days. What we're proposing is that you have high days, and then in between those high days, you want to have low days. So that doesn't mean you do nothing, but that just means you don't want the same sort of stress, same high intensity, more games on those days. Just give the body a chance to recover.
I feel like it's kind of either one extreme or the other. So there's either people generalising too much, or they play too many sports at the same time, or they're specialising too early. So if we go and have a look at more from a specialising perspective, I guess, do kids need to actually specialise early to become elite or to make pro levels, or are they better off taking a bit more of a generalised approach?
Best athletes, long-term, most robust, have the longest careers, typically played multiple sports when they were younger and then started to specialise when, I guess, the pathway or the timing was right. And for most sports, that's around sort of 15, 16, where you start to get a bit more serious on one sport. But up until that point, you want to have some variety. The key there, though, is even though they start to focus on one sport, there's still variety coming from their gym programs, their speed work, all that sort of stuff. It's not just, now I'm just a full-time athlete and all I do is one thing. It's that you start to put more attention into one thing and all the things that help you be successful in that sport. So if we look at footy, for example, you can't progress in footy if you don't have speed. So yes, you might be doing footy now 3-4 times a week training, and in and around that, you're trying to structure your gym, your speed, because you need to be big and strong, you need to be fast, you need to be fit enough, and then any other session around that is recovery, because you got to then recover to then do the next session really well.
And I know you had a LeBron, Jason Tatum example around this kind of topic. So do you want to share that with us?
Well, I think those that know LeBron, he potentially could have been a wide receiver in the NFL, as well as, if not the greatest ever, one of the top 2 or 3 greatest ever in the NBA. So he was very much a dual athlete. Michael Jordan obviously quit basketball, went and played baseball. LeBron's not the greatest, then Michael Jordan is. So those guys that were really successful was off the back of earlier days, really well-rounded skill sets, not just doing the same thing. Jason had obviously injured, and there's multiple reasons why that might have happened, but one of the cases made is for a guy that, like we said, was from age 10 skills coaches, plays a really grueling season, then off season it's just more games, more skills work, so lots of shots up, essentially the same movements to really refine it and become a real, I guess, top NBA player. But the question is, or the concern is, at what cost? So yes, if your shooting's not great, you got to work on it, but you got to remember that you can't put all your eggs in one basket and then not still develop some resiliency and robustness with how you move and your strength and your power.
So as a general rule, we have the 1-to-1 ratio. Can you unpack that for our listeners and explain what that sort of looks like?
Yep. So for athletes pre and during their peak height velocity, so typically sort of up to 13, 14 for girls, sort of that 14, 15 for boys, maybe 16 for late developers, but around that sort of 14, 15 age group and younger, 1-to-1 ratio, we're talking there about, so for every hour they're training and playing sport, so total, all their sports combined, they should be spending the same amount of time on their prep work for their body. So that can be their gym, their speed, their recovery, any mobility work, all that sort of stuff. So things away from the sport that help you get right for your sport. Then post that, so then sort of that 15, 16 onwards, we start to talk about 2-to-1. So if you're doing 10 hours a week between game and training for your sport, then we're talking 10 to 20 hours, depending on where you're at, that goes into getting your body right so that it performs well and it can stack up to long seasons and seasons back to back. There'll be plenty of people that hear that and go, oh, well, geez, that's a lot. And that's the point. So the question is, can I fit my gym in? Or I can't do 10 hours of gym and mobility and recovery work. Well, if you probably shouldn't be doing 10 hours of sport. And that's why we're seeing, in my opinion, injuries skyrocket, because people aren't doing the away from the sport work to match these insane training and playing loads. What should happen, in my opinion, is a lot more of a generalized approach where the gym and the running mechanics and all that form the foundation before they even really play sport. And I guess a mindset that we've talked about before is get your Monday to Friday right, so that the weekend, earn the right for the weekend to take the field, let alone give yourself the best chance of playing well.
And that's the conversation that we are now having with parents around who they play 3 or 4 sports during one season, and we try and say you've got this 1-to-1 rule that we apply, and for most people they don't have the time to fit in 10 hours of gym speed or recovery or whatever that looks like to prepare themselves for the demands of their sport. So it becomes about, all right, well, you got to sacrifice something. You can't play basketball, footy, swim. You can't do it all and expect to perform well, because it's the classic jack of all trades, master of none. So,
which is where, so for example, it was easier a long time ago, my time, that the sports didn't overlap so much. You tend to play one and then you had a bit of a social sport or something as a bit of an out, which is what we're saying. That's your variety. So for me, it's, as example B, if you're really focused and you want to have a career in AFL and footy is your passion, you love it, it probably means you're not a rep basketballer. You might dabble in a bit, but to me, the conversation would be with your basketball coach that, hey, I'll fill in when I can. I'll play a bit at school, shoot around with my mates, but footy's my focus and I just don't have the time to go 2 nights a week with basketball. And we've had some great chats with some parents that it's been really good. Kids that they rep soccer and only play a bit of school basketball, even though they love it, because they know that I can't do everything if I'm going to do it well. So they're jumping in with us a few sessions a week. They're in and around their sport, trying to recover well and look after themselves, but they're at the same time, it's the hardest thing, especially for teenagers, is to say no to some of these opportunities, because they realise that to do, like you said, some things well, you can't do everything.